Hey guys, LevelCap here, and some time ago I covered a supposed battlefield killer called World War III. The hype leading up to this game's launch was massive. The trailer shows what looked like a modern military FPS set in an urban environment with tons of authentic looking weapons and vehicles. The gameplay looked like it was ripped straight out of Battlefield's playbook. Pretty much everyone was cautiously optimistic that this game could be a contender in the tactical FPS genre. But the game's launch was a mess. Network issues, gameplay bugs, balance problems, you name it, World War III had it all. It was also immediately clear that the underlying game was very unpolished. Character animations were rigid and buggy, vehicle physics were a bit of a mess, hit registration left a lot to be desired as did the performance, and the general balance and flow of the game was all over the place. Sniper rifles not getting one-shot headshot kills against players wearing armored helmets, vehicles able to spawn camp enemy teams. There are many design elements to the game that look like they hadn't really considered the gameplay aspect of it all. But the thing that really caught my attention in the first place and sort of stood out after it came out was just how close it got to being a good game. The assets were extremely good. It had some cool concepts in there, but it just never got all the way. Now, why am I going back to cover this game in 2020? Despite the player base dwindling and the game itself not getting updates since April, some recent news has shown that there may be a light at the end of World War III's tunnel. It's also looking like the next Battlefield title will be a modern military FPS, but it won't be launching until next year. That opens the door for a competitor like World War III to stand out from the crowd and take center stage as the large-scale infantry combat game. World War III's developer has partnered with my.games, the publisher that handles Warface and many other free-to-play titles. Now, this news could be seen as a mixed bag. On one hand, it means that Farm 51 will have the funding and resources to finish the development of World War III, but on the other hand, it raises a ton of concerns about maybe pay-to-win issues and general free-to-play worries like aggressive monetization, ugly cosmetics, dumb XP grinds, and more. My.games do have a little bit of a reputation for publishing AAA titles or free-to-play games with insane grinds. The good news is that the developers did an AMA to answer questions about the partnership and plainly stated that pay-to-win elements were a no-go for them. The developers also maintain complete creative control and freedom over the game. It sounds like my.games are just bankrolling on the game, hoping that it pays off when it leaves early access. Obviously, that is going to be an uphill battle, but let's get into why it might actually work. The Farm 51 released their 2020 roadmap for World War III recently, and it has some promising milestones. The first major one is an Asian theater of war. Right now, all the maps and character options are European-based. There's certainly a lot of variety in the existing content, but some of the maps blend together a bit. I'd love to see some maps inspired by, say, the megastructure cities of Hong Kong or some jungle-themed maps even. Of course, new maps, strikes, and weapons are also on the roadmap, but it sounds like the devs are going back over all the existing content to flesh it out based on player feedback. One of the more significant milestones on the roadmap is a new movement system. Right now, there's a ton of issues with the way characters are animated and move around the map. When you run, your gun is lowered off screen, which looks really weird. When characters lean, it looks like their torso is about to snap in two. Running animations often have a stutter to them that makes it hard to track moving targets. It just generally looks unpolished and not up to the standards of a modern FPS. Unlike some of the other milestones on the roadmap, however, we actually have gotten a look at the new movement system. It was available as a preview earlier this year, and the developers have uploaded several videos on YouTube. Improvements include a reworked first-person sprinting animation, improved vaulting animations for vaulting and sprinting, a new vault slide mechanic, and a more realistic depth of field when using blur for ADSing. The last one is interesting because the ADS view in most FPS games really isn't realistic at all. When you aim down the sights of a weapon in real life, you're really just focusing on the optics and the rest of the gun just sort of fades away. Most games, however, just align the gun model with the camera, so you still see the sight housing, the body of the gun, etc. World War III's upcoming depth of field system blurs the gun and the sight models to the point that it almost looks realistic. Of course, it's still not totally realistic, but it is a lot better than most other games achieve. Generally speaking, the preview footage of the movement update looks really promising. I'm not sure how much progress they've made since the footage was uploaded, but even if those changes launched the day, it does look like a dramatic improvement over the current state of the game. Another big ticket on the roadmap is real-time weapon customization. Many games these days allow players to alter their loadouts mid-match, but World War III currently locks you into whatever loadout you've made before jumping into a match. This was a big problem for World War III, as you could join a match and just not have a loadout that was properly outfitted for the combat that you were about to run into. It also makes it incredibly challenging to test different loadouts and attachments to see what you like best. Being able to change your loadout mid-match is something I consider a requirement feature of most games in 2020, or at least games of this type. Heck, the original Crysis let you do it without even going into a menu, and that game came out in 2007. And excitingly enough, the image that they used sort of implies that we may see a Crysis-like system coming, which could be really interesting. The UI and heads-up display are also getting completely reworked. Now, I hadn't played World War III since 2018, and diving back into it was pretty overwhelming. The menu user interface does a lousy job of explaining to new players what's actually going on and how to customize things. Quality improvements to the menu UI that can more clearly separate and explain things for new players would be great. In-game heads-up display could also use some work, but I've honestly found it to be somewhat competent. The information for the most part is clearly labeled and displayed when you need to see it, but deeper customization would be great. I'm kind of spoiled by Battlefield letting me change things like visibility, color, size, and more when it comes to my heads-up display elements. So I'm not expecting a total redesign of the UI, but more customization would be ideal. For example, when I call in a UAV, the minimap is painfully small. Being able to make it bigger would be great, and is a pretty basic feature for most modern FPS games. The developers are also working on a new progression system, and this is kind of a take it or leave it for me. I like it when games reward me for playing well. If I get a lot of headshots with a gun, having a weapon camo that reflects that is kind of cool, but I can't stand having to complete specific challenges that have nothing to do with playing the objective or helping my team to unlock cool new stuff. Hopefully they're just adding more stuff to unlock rather than padding out new unlocks by making us do chores to get them. Finally, there's performance optimizations. Right now, I can tell you that the game does not run as well as you'd expect. Depending on the map, you'll see much lower frame rates than you would expect. If you're used to getting, say, 100 plus FPS in Battlefield or Modern Warfare, expect to get maybe 60 to 70 FPS in World War III on high settings. And on some maps, that can drop even lower on low settings. Turning certain settings down certainly helps, but it's clear the devs have a lot of work left to do in this area. Now, the roadmap is great and all, but I still think there's some stuff left that the devs have not addressed. First, audio is one. I used to think Battlefield 5 and Modern Warfare did a bad job with enemy footstep audio, but the enemies in World War III are basically ninjas. Footstep audio is just bad. You can barely hear them, your teammates are often as loud as enemies, and even when you do hear footsteps, pinpointing their position is an absolute nightmare. It's easier to locate enemies based on their random callouts than it is their footsteps. Now, one of the other big issues I have with World War III is the end of round flow. When you finish a match, you get a typical end of round report showing you what your XP earned, your match stats, etc. But then it kicks you to the main menu and you have to rejoin a whole new server. To be frank, this is totally asinine and was pointed out to the devs when the game first launched. Kicking players off servers at the end of a match is what kills servers. Every extra step you put between players and playing the game is another reason to, well, not play another match. In nearly every multiplayer game I can think of, finishing a match keeps you in the server and automatically loads the next map. It's a common sense thing, and I'm really dumbfounded that World War III has still not fixed this problem. And in a lot of ways, these little things matter just as much as the big ticket items. If you've got a great underlying game, but there's a lot of steps and redundancies and just downtime in between actually playing it, then you've got a big problem with your gameplay flow. Players like to spend their time in-game, not trying to get into a game. So, this is all great talk, but when are these milestones actually rolling out? 2020 is half over and there's a ton of content on the roadmap, and like I said at the start of the video, the game's last update was in April. The good news is that the devs have been talking about the big 0.9 update for a while, testing bits and pieces of it, like the new movement system. Unfortunately, it seems like they keep pushing its launch back. But assuming they get it out soon, it could do a lot for the game. As for the rest of the milestones, it's really anyone's guess. Ultimately, I think World War III is going to fly under the radar until it gets closer to full release. Early access, unfortunately, is where many games go to die, but some games use it as a time to build a core and loyal audience. At its peak, World War III had 11,000 concurrent players, which isn't bad for an indie early access game, but that was right after the game's launch, and it's currently struggling to maintain enough players to even fill a server. If they can pull players back in with significant updates and start maintaining concurrent player counts, I could see this game having a little bit of a resurgence. The roadmap is promising, and I think it's enough to get players back in, assuming they do a good job. With a publisher as big as my.games bankrolling World War III, it's certainly possible. World War III is already shockingly good compared to other games from similar developers, but it's certainly no Battlefield yet. What are your thoughts on World War III? With Battlefield likely MIA until 2021, do you think there's a spot for World War III to take center stage, or are the developers just not up to the task? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.